families. My condolences on your loss, and condolences to those who are not here today. The first thing I would like to do is just to acknowledge that all of us, we've heard from you, we've heard in previous testimony and hearings that we've had, that all of us recognize that safety is the underlying most important foundational piece of our aviation system, not just in this country, but around the world. And as leaders in that space, I know that all of the folks here are putting that as a top priority. I can tell from your testimony, not just your verbal, but also your written testimony and the meetings that I've had with folks who are also part of the FAA. And I think that one of the pieces that we have to also keep in mind is that pronouncements from anyone, whether it's manufacturers, stakeholders, members of Congress, or other people who are performing oversight about what any causes might have been of these accidents, are premature until we get the results of the investigations. And I've appreciated all of you bringing that up and continuing to remind folks of that. One of the things I would like to start off with is actually a follow-up from the line of questioning that Mr. Balderson was on earlier, which is to ask Mr. Carey, you mentioned that the invitation for the folks from Allied Pilots made on for a June 5th simulator training was canceled. I'm curious if you could tell us what the reasoning for the cancellation was?
We're still trying to determine that. We initially received an invitation to go down to the Boeing simulator at Miami, 737 MAX full motion simulator, and Captains Goldberg behind me and Captain Tazier were going to participate in a flight review of the MCAS system at Boeing's invitation. The invitation was withdrawn. We're trying to get some simulator time either at Boeing. I mentioned earlier Ethiopian has a simulator we're trying to get to use, and also a correction to my earlier statement, there are also two 737 MAX simulators in Canada. So if Boeing will not renew their invitation, we will certainly go purchase time at one of those other carriers.
So at this point, there hasn't been a rescheduling of the invitation?
No, that's somewhat upsetting to us. I mean, we're the largest airline in the world, and we would like a fair take at reviewing this MCAS scenario in a muscle memory scenario, as Captain Sullenberger described earlier.
And then I'd like to, Mr. Babbitt, I would like to hear your thoughts on the funding question and making sure that we're keeping FAA properly funded. Both what was your experience, and then if you can opine on where we're at right now. I'm not sure if you feel comfortable doing that because you're not currently the administrator, but I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Yep. Thank goodness for that. Thank you. The funding is always an issue. You come in with a robust, we have always an enormous amount of things that people would like the FAA to undertake and do. You simply don't have the funds, and so prioritizing what you need to do, and obviously what is at the fulcrum of that prioritizing is safety. And I think, and I didn't get to answer Mr. Johnson's question, but I think the biggest fear we have is, and funding will help alleviate it, but the biggest fear that I have is complacency. We have a system that is incredibly safe, and therefore a lot of people say, well, geez, it's running great. Why do we need to do anything else? Well, we need to do anything else because we're always breaking new boundaries, pioneering new areas, understanding new technology, and we have to evaluate those things. And remember, the FAA's task is not to design the systems, it's to design the safety boundaries that the system has to operate in. It's sort of like baseball. The commissioners set the rules, the players have to play by those rules, and that's what we do. That's what the FAA does. And so prioritizing, and I guess the best thing I could suggest is that we make certain that when the FAA does in fact prioritize, they share those thoughts with the committees, which I know we do.
Thank you. And finally, I would just say that the concept of oversight is something that is our duty under the Constitution. We also have the duty to make sure that we're properly funding all of our safety, especially aviation, but all of our safety mechanisms in this country. So that's on Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. Recognize Representative Craig of